Well, hey everyone, and welcome to Get Your Geek On's Marvel Cinematic Universe Retrospective. I'm Robert, that's Aaron, and we're here to talk movie by movie through the MCU's Infinity Saga, 23 movies across 11 years.
Expect spoilers as we get into each movie, but we will start off with each video letting you know whether we consider this an essential movie for the overall arc of the MCU. Think of it as a guide getting you into the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of filler movies that maybe, you don't have to see the whole thing. But if you're a completionist like me, you'll probably rate them all essential. I guess we'll find out. So, 2011's Captain America, the First Avenger. Directed by Joe Johnston, this was the final movie released by Marvel Studios in the lead up to The Avengers. Made $65 million opening weekend, just under $370 million over its run. The movie stars Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, Captain America. Haley Atwell as Agent Peggy Carter. You've got Hugo Weaving in there as the Red Skull. Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes. Stanley Tucci as Dr. Erskine. And Tommy Lee Jones playing Colonel Phillips. This movie had a major all-star cast.
It did.
All right, so first thing to talk about, Aaron.
Yes.
Is this movie essential?
Yes. I still think it is. 100%.
100%. You know what? That's literally in my notes. 100%. This movie is 100% essential, not necessarily to the story, right? But it's essential to understanding who Captain America is, what drives Steve Rogers, all of that. That is essential. The actual story of this movie, you don't necessarily need all of that. But what is essential, and we'll talk about it, is the first half of this movie. Mm-hmm. The first half of this movie is 100% essential to who Steve Rogers and Captain America is, and that plays into all of the other movies he's in, including the Avengers, his sequels, all of the Avengers movies, all of his sequels, everything. It plays into Captain America. You have to watch this movie.
I'll give you that. The first half is going to really give who Captain America is. I think it's also essential because of the tie-in with the Cosmic Cube.
Yeah, which is technically not the Cosmic Cube.
True.
It's the Tesseract, which contains the Space Stone.
That is true. I forget that they do that to the thing. Right. When I first saw it, it was always the Cosmic Cube.
It was always the Cosmic Cube, which totally plays a role in Red Skull and Captain America's story. Like, that's something Red Skull's always after, is the Cosmic Cube. Everybody thought this was the Cosmic Cube when the movie came out, but it was later revealed to not be. I don't know that it really matters, because I don't think they're ever going to introduce the Cosmic Cube, because they would have to show it exactly the way this appears.
But this is the Cosmic Cube.
So, no, it's not.
We'll talk about this.
So they do not call it the Cosmic Cube. I don't know. Maybe there was a rights issue with it. I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, and also, who knows if they were going to go one route or a different route with the Infinity Stones too at this point. I mean, because this is the only one that we've technically seen too at this point, right? Yeah. We haven't seen any other stones. Yeah,
this is the first one we see. It got introduced in the post-credits of Thor, and now here it is in Captain America, the First Avenger. So let's talk a little bit about going into this movie. How did it happen? The public expectations around this movie. So this is the final movie leading up to the Avengers. Yes. You had the first two Iron Man movies, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, and now Captain America, the First Avenger. This is, post-Thor.
Yes.
Post San Diego Comic-Con, where they announced the entire Avengers cast. So the public expectations, do you remember what people were talking about when this movie was coming out?
So one thing I remember, and this was while they were producing the movie, after the movie came out, and money years when Iron Man 1 came out, is it will tank overseas because everyone overseas doesn't want to see America superhero. Mm-hmm. And that, I do remember when this movie came out, everyone kept saying it's going to tank overseas, it's going to be a crap movie. It's not going to do well. Obviously, the numbers say different, though.
Well, and it didn't tank, but it wasn't as successful as Thor. Mm-hmm. And now both movies actually made the same exact amount opening weekend, $65 million. Mm-hmm. But Thor made $450 million overall, and Captain America was at $370. So it definitely made less money. Whether that's due to the quality of the movie or just the appeal of it. Yeah. Also, Thor was released in May, which is traditionally the start of the blockbuster season. This movie was released in July, usually when things are dying down a little bit more. So that might have all played into it. certainly those overseas expectations. I didn't look into the international box office to see if there was a major difference between Thor and Captain America.
I didn't either, and I should have. It was one thing I was thinking
Yeah.
about, but it was one of those I remember people talking about it.
Yeah. So, anyways, what about you? Personal expectations going into the movie?
Dang, Chris Evans in a third comic book movie. That was my first thought.
At least.
Right?
I mean, because he was in the first two Fantastic Fours.
Scott Pilgrim.
He was in Scott Pilgrim. He was in The Losers. I think that was
I
before
forgot about
this.
The Losers.
Like, yeah, he's been in like
Oh.
everything. Chris Evans has been in like every superhero movie ever.
Yeah, I completely forgot about The Losers. Oh my gosh, yeah. So my first expectation was, okay, is he finally going to stick to a character? Because at this point, like we've said already, he's jumped movies. Fantastic Four didn't do well, so I'm sure he was ready to jump ship. Scott Pilgrim was a one-off.
Yep.
Losers is a one-off. So,
although they would have made a sequel if it had been successful.
Oh, it would have been. They would have kept
It
going
was
with
not.
that. No. So my expectation in it was I enjoy Chris Evans because he seems like I'm a nerd. I want to joke. I want to have fun.
Sure.
And I enjoy him. I think he's a good actor.
And that is not really Captain America's character, is it?
Not at all.
Interesting.
But that's why I wanted to watch it because I was like,
Yeah.
maybe he'll add some comedy flair
Nice.
to it. I didn't know what to expect. Yeah, the international crowd though. So I was kind of wondering, how do you play an American superhero to our international fans?
I think it was really smart to set it in World War II.
Yes.
Because, everybody at this point, even Germany, is like, yeah, the Germans were the bad guys.
Exactly.
And so that it's really smart play if you're trying to, appeal to an international audience, the World War II crowd. And then, bringing in the Howling Commandos, they're a very diverse group of individuals. So, maybe that played into it too. So I know for me, going into this movie, obviously I'd seen, the Iron Man movies, Incredible Hulk, I'd seen Thor. Captain America is a character I always liked. And so I was looking forward to this movie because it was Captain America. I was looking forward to it. You were excited because of the actor. Yeah. I was excited because of the director. Joe Johnston directed this movie.
Okay.
And he directed a movie that I loved as a kid, The Rocketeer. Which is another World War II era based on a comic book movie. It's, kind of very similar themes. It's the everyman. It's the guy who's, just kind of the plucky, hero that's, going to be able, fighting Nazis. Like, that's literally what The Rocketeer is. And that's, so I was excited because it was Joe Johnston who had done that movie, and I really liked that movie. So that was the first thing. And I know the first time I watched this movie, I loved it. It was one of my favorites. I connected to the character of Steve Rogers. I was 100% on board with him. Again, especially with that first half of the movie. What about you? The first time you watched it, what was your reaction?
I love this movie.
Yeah.
It was so awesome.
Yeah.
I remember watching it back then and just really, again, I love cinematics. I loved what they did with Chris Evans, and they did the whole. They hired this lanky little actor.
Oh yeah,
and the face over it.
It looks so good.
It looks really good.
It still looks good.
Yes. And I honestly, kind of little peek, I was afraid it was going to look crappy now.
Yeah.
But it actually doesn't.
It still holds up.
So to me, I was like, that's when we do it, because I was wondering, how do you, he's supposed to be the same character, the same person.
Right.
So how do you do that? And they're like, oh, we're just going to put his face on his body.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to look like crap. Oh.
Nope.
Oh, wow. And I was like,
me.
looking at it, and I was trying to see, again, I love like picking movies a little bit like this.
Mm-hmm.
Do I see the line? Do you see where it's not blending well? And I would watch it, and even this time around, I was like,
yeah. It's perfect.
I can't tell.
And really, like, that's really impressive too, because even like his mannerisms, when like the actors playing those Chris Evans obviously is the bulky Captain America version, and I don't know who the actor was that the body double that was the small guy, but even like their bodily reactions to different things, like it feels like the same character the whole time. It feels like the same person.
And that I was going to comment in a later video. I would like to comment on that too, because the alley scene where he's in the alley after the movie.
Yes,
that plays in later on. It looks like whole. I loved it.
Yeah, it's perfect. So, anyways, all right, now we're gonna get into just a quick plot summary. We're gonna talk about big stuff. So, this movie, Hydra, run by the Red Skull, is using the Tesseract. We've already talked about it. To basically, they're gonna win World War II and take over the world.
Well,
and
Hitler looks for trinkets in the desert.
Right. And the Allies' defense is Dr. Erskine, played by Stanley Tucci, and his super soldier serum. Right. Yeah. Steve Rogers, is chosen based on these qualities beyond the physical, right?
Exactly.
He's not looking for the biggest, the strongest. He's looking for those qualities that are on the inside. And so Steve Rogers becomes Captain America. Basically, he ends up in the war, leading a strike team, eventually defeats Red Skull, but in the process, he loses his mentor, Dr. Erskine. He loses his best friend, Bucky. Eventually, he has to sacrifice himself, losing everything, right? Wakes up 70 years later, just in time for Marvel Studios to release the Avengers with Nick Fury.
Just in time for us.
So, anyways, that's kind of the bare bones plot. So, tell me a little bit about what your overall impression of this movie is. What's your favorite stuff that stands out?
So overall, first of all, Hugo Weaving knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, Hugo Weaving's great.
I loved it. Like, I loved how cynical he is in this movie, and he showed us that in The Matrix back in the day.
Yeah.
How logical and evil he could be. I loved his part in it. I loved.
Well, just real quick, as you're talking about how evil he is, I think maybe my favorite line delivery in the entire movie is there's a scene where later in the movie where their bases keep getting defeated, right? And they bring up this guy, and he's like, "I'm sorry, Herr Schmidt. We fought to the last man." And he just takes out his pistol and goes, "Evidently not," and just shoots him. And it's like, oh, that's so great. Like, I actually, that's a line I drop in real life all the time where I'm just like, "Evidently not." No one gets it. No one understands my reference. But that's
I loved it because he doesn't care about anybody but himself.
Absolutely.
It's about my power. How do I become the next? Basically the next Hitler.
Well, he wants to take over the world.
Yeah,
like they even drop it in the movie. Like, he's going to attack Germany eventually because he doesn't care about and he says that to Steve Rogers at one point. Like, you fight in a war over flags. Like, that's not what he's about. He's going to take over the world.
Yeah,
that's his mission.
I love how in the first 5-10 minutes of it, like I dropped the line earlier. While Hitler looks for trinkets in the desert, because Hitler's looking for a Holy Grail.
Indiana Jones reference right there.
Exactly. I loved it too, because I was like, really? Okay. Yeah. So he doesn't care about Hitler. He doesn't care about the Nazi agenda. He cares about Hydra, and he cares about building up his empire. He's just using Hitler at this point, and I loved how it showed off that the Red Skull is about the Red Skull. Yeah. Steve Rogers, I did enjoy it. I enjoy his character. I love him as who he is. To be honest, though, and watching it again, I had a few issues with Peggy Carter.
Okay.
Just a few.
Well, we'll talk about those. I want to talk first before we get to those. I think the first half of this movie is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's so good. Everything with Skinny Steve is great. Everything with Stanley's Tucci, perfection. I love it all. The stuff on the army base is all great.
That scene sold me, honestly, finally, with the movie, where... So I love Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah. And he's
so great.
Oh my gosh,
movie. He steals every scene he's in.
Oh, I love him. He does. In this movie. I think my favorite scene right there, speaking of the camp, is where they're commenting on how frail and how small he is, and he takes that dummy grenade. But grenade, he just throws it, and Steve just jumps on it. Get away! And it's like not blowing up, and he's like, "What's going on?
Is this a test?"
Yeah.
And then I love the comedic line. He's still skinny.
He just walks off. Which to me is a Tommy Lee Jones thing. Yeah. Just like, yep, that's him.
Well, he does that several times, like where he just kind of gets the last line. Like that happens there. It happens later in the camp where Steve Rogers is about to go off on his rescue mission, and he's all like pissed off at Tommy Lee Jones and all that stuff, and Peggy Carter standing there. And if you have something to say, right now is a perfect time to keep it to yourself. That's a great line. And then, of course, the very last one where, Peggy Carter gives him the kiss. And, I'm not kissing you. It's just, he gets a few of those good comedic lines. Yeah. So, but anyways, what I was saying is all of that stuff is great. It is. Once you get to past kind of the initial rescue mission. So the initial rescue mission is really good, where he goes and saves all, Bucky and all the other guys from the 107th.
And this is the first, and that's also where he first sees the Red Skull, right?
Correct. Yes. That first interaction with the Red Skull. After that, the movie definitely gets rushed. You don't really get to deal with, Cap losing his best friend. Like, there's one small scene where he's just kind of talking about how he can't get drunk because of his metabolism. So obviously, he's depressed. Like, he wants to get drunk because he wants to feel like that sorrow, that feeling.
Moment. Yeah.
And so that part you don't really get to live with his, I guess, feeling of loss or guilt over losing his friend Bucky.
You're right.
And then, of course, the very end, you know, his decision to sacrifice himself just kind of doesn't make any sense, except that in the narrative we need him to go to sleep for 70 years so he shows up as an Avenger.
Exactly.
Like they don't do a good job of explaining why there's no safe landing for this plane. Like they show you a couple images that it's obviously armed, but like is he saying it's going to blow up when it arrives there? But then why doesn't it blow up in the ice? Like it's confusing. It's like I don't know what you're saying. There's no safe landing. Well, you kind of had a safe landing. It was just in ice.
To me, at the other time too, it's like you said, there's no safe landing.
Yeah.
And you're telling me on this whole ship, there's not one dang parachute. There's
Yeah.
no one way to jump out. Like you think that Red Skull didn't have a backup plan. Like, okay, if this is gonna crash, I'm gonna get this parachute and jump out. There's nothing because that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. So
that part did feel rushed.
All right, let's get into performances.
Yes.
We already mentioned Stanley Tucci. We already mentioned Hugo Weaving,
Tommy Lee Jones.
I think Chris Evans is fantastic in this.
Yeah.
I like Haley Atwell. You had some issues.
I didn't have issues with her. So
Okay.
let me rephrase. The actress, I love her acting. I think she did good in her roles. But to me, I guess after you watch it this time still, I don't feel that true love connection. I feel a little bit, but I think what really maybe it's just this one scene that really bothered me is after he goes into the chamber and he comes out and he's all like buff and she's like, and it's just like, that comes off as more lust to me.
Well, and I think in that moment, I think that there is like, oh man, you're hunky.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's an unnatural reaction because let's be honest,
I mean,
he is.
He is.
And I do think they lay the groundwork early in the movie that clearly she has a fondness and affection for him because of who he is. Like they have that car ride that they share where he's kind of like struggling to talk to her and
that
she
awkward,
kind of even that moment where he gets the flag at Camp Lehigh and you know she kind of is smirking with him and he gets in the Jeep, and so they kind of lay that groundwork. And then I do think that after that, as you move forward, you get, you know, a ton of really great connection moments with them. And that final conversation over the radio, that sold me. That breaks me. Yeah. I mean, like every time I'm like, oh.
That's where I go back to. I think it was just that maybe in my mind, again, like you said, maybe it's just because I don't have that mindset too of like, oh, he's hunky, I want to touch that. You know, maybe that's just me at that point. But I think that bothered me a little bit because for that moment it just comes off too much like lust, because I know it's just her character is supposed to be that standoffish a little bit.
Hey,
and even that
she's looking for characters beyond the physical.
Sure. I think what finally brought me back around, because that one little moment I'm like, maybe it's just lust, where she's sitting, I think it's at like one of the bases, and they're watching the reel.
Oh, the footage.
And
yeah.
he like
he's got the picture in his compass,
there,
and Tommy Lee Jones gives a good a look over to her like, oh, what's going on there?
I can hear Tommy Lee Jones stealing the scene.
Yeah.
I think that's where I got back to like, okay, maybe it is love, because she does like show that like, aw. And then, like you said, Tommy Lee Jones steals it again. It's like, no, I gotta steal the scene. It's mine.
Yeah, and I think that definitely, like, they kind of had that play where when he comes back from the first rescue mission, he said, you know, she says, "You're late." And he's like, "Couldn't call my ride." And then later, when he's infiltrated the final Hydra base, and she shows up, and he's like, "You're late." And like they're kind of looking at each other, and like it's like they're about to kiss, and she's like, "Don't you have to chase Red Skull?" And he's like, "Oh yeah."
And that's why I think like it took me that, I think maybe it was just my mindset when I watched it for that moment. Yeah. That's where I lost it. But then like the second half, or that, I guess, or the third act essentially, is what brought me back to like, okay, she does truly love this guy.
Yeah, that final, I think that's some really excellent acting by Haley Atwell as she's just talking into a radio. You know, and she's going, Steve, like, and you know, like that conversation breaks me every time.
Really?
So,
yeah,
all right.
I can see that.
Favorite scene of the movie, go.
Oh, favorite scene.
Or I can go if you want me to.
You go first, because I got a couple.
My favorite scene is everything that happens at the World's Fair. So when he goes to the recruitment center at the World's Fair, he wants to sign up. We've already shown that he's trying to do this multiple times. And he has that conversation with Bucky again, where he's like, you know, I got no right to do any less than anybody else. Like, people are laying down their lives. Like, you don't get it. Like, and of course, Dr. Erskine is overhearing that whole conversation. So I love that part. And then that when he is then talking to Dr. Erskine in that room, and he's like, you know, so you want to kill some Nazis. And he's, you know, and is this a test? Like, I love that back and forth between the two of them. Yeah. So that whole scene, everything at the World's Fair, where, you know, Dr. Erskine is kind of doing the, you know, so where's the little guy actually from? You know, Brooklyn. You know, and you get that whole, like, okay, I'm going to give you a chance kind of thing. I love all of that. That I think is my favorite scene in the movie. but it could also be that conversation that Captain or Steve Rogers and Dr. Erskine have right before the procedure, the night before. That conversation is great too, where he's kind of like, "Why me?" And you learn a little bit about Red Skull. You learn a little about. I love the line. People forget that the first country Hitler invaded was Germany. Yep. Like that's a great little moment there where you understand that it's like, they weren't all Nazis. Like
exactly.
And this is someone that tried to get out and now is fighting against fascism basically. Yes. So I love that whole scene where they get to talk and you understand more of why Steve Rogers is chosen. Yes. Why is he Captain America? Which has a great callback at the very end with that confrontation between him and Red Skull, where he says, "What makes you so special?" Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
Exactly.
And it's like,
I love that
and you can see how angry that makes Red Skull. Mm-hmm. But it's also like, that's the answer that Steve Rogers gives because that's how he views himself. Yes. But no, like, you are special, Steve Rogers.
Which we find out later on how special too.
Is he worthy? So, all right. I've talked about a couple scenes. What about you?
So I'm kind of stuck on two scenes.
Okay.
So, again, coming from the comic book standpoint and coming from just being that little guy, always, I was the geek in high school. I was the outcast.
Picked on,
always.
All that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sure.
And, in real life, and, I don't know if you go through this, a little personal side note, you kind of get a little jaded. You do, I think. You kind of put that little shell up sometimes. Sure. You may go through things. And it's interesting. He goes to the boot camp knowing the guy next to him is 220, solid muscle, this a foot taller than me, doesn't have the little limp. But again, I think the camp scenes are my favorite because he's the first one on the grenade. All the other guys, the big 220 guy, he jumped 3 miles back. He's already out of the camp.
Yep.
Tommy Lee Jones is staring there, and that line is true. He's still skinny.
Well,
and he had nothing else bad to say at that point.
Right, and right before he throws the grenade, he's saying, like, you don't win a war with niceness, you win it with guts.
Exactly.
And he thinks that somebody else is going to do it. Yep. No, it's Steve Rogers.
So that shows off his bravery.
Absolutely.
And then I love
his intelligence with the flag.
Yes, that's what I was going for. Because I was like, he's like, no one's been able to do that. You see the first guy going to try to climb it. Nope, can't climb it.
Nope.
And he just looks at it.
Pulls the pin out.
Figures it out in a few moments. Oh, I got the flag. I'm going to get my ride now.
Yep.
And so I love those scenes because it shows off that he is an average man. Yeah. He thinks outside the box. And that's what I do love about Steve. He always thought outside the box in the comics and the shows. Every time we see him, it's not just like Iron Man at this point, it's I'm just going to go punch it as hard as I can and see what happens. No, this guy's like, well, why climb it when I could just
devise a strategy?
Okay,
yeah.
And
sorry.
No, that's my favorite scene. And I think the other part I like, which is where I am a little torn, is right afterwards, and I know it's a small scene, really. Right after he becomes finally Captain America, they injected him. He comes out of the tube, and the doctor gets shot.
Yeah,
he's dying, and the last thing he does is he
just points at because he had told him, don't forget who you are, and not a I forget what he says, not a something, but a good man.
Exactly.
It's like just be a good man. That's
and it's something because like you said in the earlier scene, he's already connected to this doctor.
Yeah,
he looks up to him, and to have him die like that. Normally would probably turn a normal man like, this guy, I'm going to find him, I'm going to kill him. Yeah. But Steve didn't go kill him. I mean, the guy does kill himself. But
right, he takes the cyanide.
He really wanted to know what was going on. It wasn't, I'm just, like, to me, Iron Man,
he wasn't out for revenge.
No.
But
it was to figure out what's happening, to capture him.
Well, and, he doesn't like bullies. Like, he's like,
that is true, yeah.
Like, I'm going to, put this bully down. So you dropped a little personal bit. So part of why this character is always connected to me, and part of why the beginning of this movie is, just so special to me. Mm-hmm. So my grandfather, who's my personal hero, is my favorite. Growing up with him, he was my hero. He had polio when he was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And left him with, a deformity, a limp, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And, so World War II comes around, and, he's Steve Rogers. Mm-hmm. He tried to enlist multiple times, and they wouldn't let him.
Oh, wow.
So he's Steve Rogers, but they didn't have a super soldier serum. He couldn't stand by while other people were going off to war. So I kind of had that personal connection that I really feel. I'm like, man, my grandfather was Captain America, and he ended up guarding prisoners here stateside because he's like, I have to do something. I remember when I was a kid, you know, we were at like a family party and there were like friends there and stuff. And, you know, my grandpa had a lot of rough things in his life. Like I said, he had a lot of health problems. Even later in life, he had a lot more health problems. His wife actually passed away when they were, I think she was in her 40s from cancer and stuff. And they had 11 kids. So my mom, I have a bunch of aunts and uncles.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I remember overhearing this conversation where they said, you know, like, man, you were dealt such a rough hand. And I'll never forget his response was, I had friends that didn't come home. Like, every day is a blessing. And I was like, yeah. You know, so when I watch this movie, literally, like, the first half of this movie, I'm like, oh, my God, like, this is my grandpa. Like, so it's hard to be objective watching this movie.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
I just have that personal connection to it.
And see, like I said, he's not a terrible hero. I just don't. Captain America has always been a different level for me because we all know, like, if you know anything about me, Spider-Man's always my hero. That's where my connection is.
For sure.
That's where, you know, maybe talk about it later. But like I said, Steve is just. I wish I could be that way, but you know, I've been through so much stuff in life that's like, even Steve later on in the movies, but in this movie alone, he's gone through, like you said, Bucky dies. Everybody's dying.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're introduced to him, his parents are dead.
Yeah.
Like, and then he loses his mentor, and then he loses his best friend, and then he loses everything because he wakes up 7 years later, and he's a man out of time.
Exactly.
He's not, all of his connections are gone. His final line, I had a date.
And it's never, for me, that hurts too, but every time. And for me, though, like, Steve stays humble throughout this whole movie. Absolutely. He never finally says, you know what, I deserve this rest. I deserve anything. Especially when, after he got the soldier serum, and they were like, well, we're supposed to have an army. We're going to do this one guy. And they just have him promoting bonds. And he got tired of it. This isn't what he wanted to do. Yeah. And I love that scene because he's not just saying, okay, fine, I'll keep doing this for the whole war. No, it's like, there's prisoners. That camp's how far? I'm going to go. I mean, that's basically what it was. Yeah. And a shield that was, I love how it throwback to the original shield. Oh, yeah, that's great. But it was
the original costume, like the costume he's wearing in the Bonds is all that's all great. So, anyways, we've talked a lot about this movie already. On this rewatch, has your opinion changed on this movie now that you've rewatched it again? Is it as good as you remember? Worse, better? Where are you at?
I'm gonna say, you know what? Just watching it again because again, I love Tommy Lee Jones.
Yep.
I love Hugo Weaving. Yep. I love Chris Evans. I'm actually enjoyed it more.
Nice.
I think because now I know where everything's going. Now that, like you said, now it's not the Cosmic Cube, it's the Tesseract. You know, we know a little more about the history of where everything was. Yeah. I actually enjoyed it a little bit more.
Nice.
How about you?
So I've seen this movie a ton of times. This is probably my most watched movie of the MCU.
Really? Okay.
Because again, I love this character. I love this introduction. So no, my opinion has not changed on this rewatch. And for me, the first half is a perfect movie.
Yes, I will give you that. I love that first half.
The second half is good, but you know, I love the character itself. But no, my opinion hasn't really changed. I think it's evolved over time. The first time I saw it, you know, I really like it. I think it was like, man, this is the best movie ever. Yeah. I think it dropped after that, but it's kind of settled in right where it is, and I would say that opinion's, you know, pretty consistent.
And see, I think that I have to agree with you, especially like you said, that first half is a perfect movie. I loved how they did it because when I first watched it, I always thought they were going to do the first half is going to be World War II, the next half is going to be a modern. And I loved how they basically did all of it in World War II, except the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes of it, really. Mm-hmm. But like you said, the second half does feel rushed.
Well, they spend the time telling you why Steve Rogers is Captain America.
Exactly.
Like, that to me is so important. Like, you need to know why it's him. Exactly. And so that to me is why you go, why did this guy get chosen? Why is this guy the guy that got the super soldier serum? Why is he, quote unquote, worthy?
Exactly.
And you see all of that. They show you multiple different instances where he's, you know, fighting against the bully in the alley and getting beat up. I could do this all day. Where he's, you know, where he's now, you know, keeps trying to enlist. You know, you keep seeing that. You keep seeing, you know, like you said, the scenes at the camp where you see his intelligence, you see his bravery, you see, you know, all of those things. And you also see, again, that humility that you talked about where he's asking Dr. Erskine the night before the procedure, why me? Yeah. Why is it me? And it's like, here's all the reasons why.
Like, have you not watched yourself in the last 45 minutes?
The movie showed us why it was him.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I really appreciate it.
I think this was I'll be honest, out of the movies we watched so far, this is probably the perfect origin story. I think, for me.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, yeah, we had Iron Man's origin story, which still a little rocky for me. Thor was a little, I think we said it in the last video, he didn't really change much.
Yeah.
He stayed the same, but how did you do all this? But Steve was Steve from the beginning to the end, and we see why he is, from beginning to end, still the same character.
Well, and I think that's the thing about this character is all the other characters, you know, Tony Stark goes through an evolution in his movie.
Right.
Thor does to an extent, you know, maybe not a major one, but he learns something, right? The thing about Steve is that the world around him is changing, but he's not going to change. He's not going to compromise. He's going to be, and you see that in later movies where even though in this movie, of course, he's a soldier. He's on the side of the government. By the time you get to Winter Soldier, he's, you know, against the government. You know, Civil War, he's against the government.
Yes.
But that's not because he himself has changed. It's because the governmental ideals have changed. It's because the way that their power is being wielded has changed, and he's going, that's not what it's for. You know, there's a great, and we're going to talk about that in the Avengers. There's a great scene of him and Nick Fury where Nick Fury is talking to him, and he, you know, he's talking about, you know, they said that we won. They didn't say what we lost. You know, and he's making that commentary on how the world has changed in those 70 years. And you understand this is a man out of time. He's a man from the 1940s, and he has that mentality, and he carries it through. And so I think that's what sets him apart from the other characters. They go on their personal journeys. For Steve, you know, there is an evolution of his mindset and his character, but he's always going to be that little guy in the alley who's willing to stand up to the bully. He's the guy in the movie theater who everyone else is getting annoyed with, the guy who's talking trash, and he's the one that says, "Hey, show some respect."
Exactly.
You know, and then he goes out and gets beat up in the alley. But you know, like to him, you know, you stand up to the bully. You stand up.
Exactly. And you're right. I really like the movie, though. I think, again, that the rewatch maybe enjoy it a little bit more, honestly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we already kind of talked about the Infinity Saga, how it fits in.
Yes.
Mainly, you know, you've got the Tesseract. It sets up Captain America for the entire movie. Any other ways that it ties into the overall arc? I mean, definitely you get the Peggy and Steve Rogers, you know, relationship, which really does tie into his entire arc.
Yes, it does.
We get Red Skull, who eventually shows back up.
Kind of. Halfway shows up, I guess.
It's a very different character.
Yeah, a different actor.
Well, yes, it is a different actor as well.
But the only other thing that ties in, I mean, I can't think of anything else that really ties in, because at this point, like you said, he's a man out of time, so everybody's dead.
Yeah,
really.
everything else is, you know,
they're all gone. The only thing that you've seen again in the Hulk, supposedly in the deleted scene, and the couple of scenes in Iron Man where it's in the background, and then a little more foreground is the shield.
Yeah, just Easter egg
and
stuff.
that's it.
But not really tying in with the Infinity Saga.
Yeah, nothing else ties in. The Tesseract that ties in everything.
Yeah,
that's about it.
All right. Well, now that we've talked about this movie to the death, right? This is a long video. I mean, it's hard not to talk about every scene in this movie.
Oh yeah, it's such a good, well played out movie.
It really is. So, what are your final thoughts? What is your rating for Captain America: The First Avenger?
My final thoughts, again, all-star cast. I think, you know, Tommy Lee Jones, Hugo, Chris Evans, what's her name that plays Haley? Haley, yeah. All of them nailed their roles. Yep. Even the guy who played an early version of Howard Stark.
Oh yeah, Dominic Cooper.
We didn't even talk about him.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Dominic Cooper, but
he was good in the movie too.
He's good too. There's
no
bad performances in this movie. The Howling Commandos are tons of fun.
Oh yeah,
you know, they only get like 5 minutes, but they're fun.
Exactly, and I wish that's one thing I will say. I wish they would have fleshed out more.
Yeah.
That would have been cool to see Sergeant Fury, because there's a point where he is Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos. But another tangent for the other day.